Hi, Mick McQuaid here. I'd like to welcome you to this brief demonstration of doing the Capstone project process with Overleaf and the iSchool Capstone template. So I'm going to assume that you have created an Overleaf account so that you have the screen that you see before you, with the exception of you wouldn't have this paper. And then I'm going to assume that you've downloaded the ischooltemplate.zip file from the iSchool website. So what I'm going to do is walk you through it. So I'm going to upload a project, select a zip file. I'm going to select the ischooltemplate.zip file. And it opens. And you can see the word compiling over here. It's actually compiling the PDF from what I've provided for it, which is this list of files over here. These are all the files that were in the ischooltemplate.zip file. And Overleaf assumes that main.tex is the name of the file. In fact, if I go in the menu, you can see that main.tex is set to be the default name. I could have changed it to anything else, but I just leave it at the default. It sets PDF LaTeX as the default compiler. I'm going to change that to XE LaTeX because XE LaTeX handles more Unicode code points than, well, PDF LaTeX doesn't recognize Unicode, so that's a problem. I also have set my theme to Solarized Light. I've set my font size very large, and I've set my key bindings to Vim. So in those respects, what I've got going here may look a little bit different from what you've got going when you run this. Okay, but basically, you're going to see your source file in a pane and the rendered PDF in a pane, and you can change the size of those panes and the orientation of those panes and do what you please. I have a large monitor, so I can have two good full-size pages shown here. If you're cramped for monitor space, you may want to set things up differently. Okay, now the main thing that you want to change to begin with is this main.tex file. So this contains a lot of the settings, including the name of your project, your name, the name of your advisor, the date, and a bunch of other stuff. So we'll change that in here. A lot of this is boilerplate that you shouldn't change. These are all packages, LaTeX packages that I'm using that you don't need to change, you don't need to worry about. If you go down here to title, you see that title has both a title in it and it also has a directive vspace minus 0.2 inches. And what's happened is that quite erroneously, Overleaf has imagined that that's the title. So it, instead of picking up the title of the project, which is the title it should have picked up, it's picked up everything up to this first curly brace here. So it's picked up this. So I'm going to rename this Capstone Project. And you can rename it whatever you like, but it's useful for you to have the project name. And then the project name will appear at the top, and then when you go back out to the menu, when you first log into Overleaf and see your projects, then you'll see Capstone Project shown. Okay, and frequently Overleaf recompiles your project, partly because you may have collaborators who've compiled it in between times that you were logged in. Okay, so I'm going to change the title of the project to, what shall we change it to? I'm going to change it to the effect of gamma rays. I don't know if that's hyphenated or not. I'll put in another line on man marigolds, and there's an obscure historical reference for you. So and I'm going to change this, I'm just going to abbreviate it here, so that the actual title um, is above there. Oops, let me, the actual title is above there. If I recompile this now, I'm going to write the file, which causes it to recompile, and now I get this title. Um, because I've changed the title line, this is for places where the title has to appear with no line breaks in it. And an example of that would be this right here, the project, the effect of gamma rays by student's name has been examined, and you should actually write the whole project name out, but I'm too lazy. Okay, this line here you'll leave alone because you're writing a capstone project. If you were writing a capstone thesis, you would change this to the same thing except false, and it would print out a thesis. And I haven't really tested the thesis option, so the thesis option may not work. We may have to work on that. And then the date is here. Oh, this date is not really used. See, it says here this date is not really used unless grant date is blank, and grant date is not blank. Let's put something in grant date. I'll put the current month that I'm writing this in, and I'll change the student's name. See, now it says June 2020, and I'll change the student's name to my name. So every time I make some little change, I can recompile this and see if I made a mistake in the name, or in whatever it is that I did. So there's a place for you to put the committee chair and the committee chair's title. There's a place for you to put the reader. There isn't a special place for the reader's title, so you can do a line break followed by the reader's title. And then there's, if you have a third committee member, there's provision for that, but you would have to uncomment this line. The percent sign is a comment. You have to uncomment this line, and then you'd also have to uncomment a line in here. So you would actually look for observer in here. And this line, I've commented this line out. This is on the signature page. And I've commented it out because otherwise you would just have a blank line. Here's the signature page. And what you would have is, if I didn't comment this line out and you didn't have an observer, there would just be a horizontal line right here. Okay, which you don't need. Generally, you don't need to edit this file. You should generally leave this file alone. There is one thing, I think, if you wanted to have baseline stretch, if you wanted to have double spacing, I think this is this where I've, there is where I've changed it. So this right here, baseline stretch equals 1, is gives single spacing. And if you change this to 2, you'll get double spacing, and probably don't do that. I know some people prefer double spacing, but I certainly do not. Okay, going back to the main.tex file where there is other stuff to change. Let's see, copyright here. I've set that to 2020. You can change that. It doesn't matter. Most people don't put a copyright because you automatically get a copyright on this, so there's no need to have a copyright page. Let's see, there's a dedication page, and I have it set up so that the dedication page is a separate page. That's by putting this new page right here. And then there's a separate acknowledgments page. You can delete either or both of these if you don't want to do any dedication or acknowledgments. And this probably should say to whomever, not whoever, grammatically, I think. Let's see. Then we have, okay, so here's just some commands that are convenient. This command puts in, if you say \etc, what happens is you get etc. Emphasized, and with a little directive after it that reduces the amount of space between this period and the next word. It just makes it look a little better. Then you input your abstract, and we can see the abstract is supposed to be a description of the work and the results of about 250 words. So you put that in here, replace all this stuff with that. Then the next thing that's important are the sections of your Capstone report. So there's the introduction section, and there's a separate file for that, intro.txt, related work section, and there's a file for that, methodology, experiments and results, and conclusions, and there are separate files for all of those. And then finally there's the bibliography, which is in the file references.bib. And there, and then there are some appendices. And you can comment all this stuff out if you don't have any appendices. And you can put the appendices in these files, or put them in other files. You can always change this to suit your needs. There's a warning here, an overfull H-box. And that overfull H-box is only 0.7 points. So that's, a point is 1/72nd of an inch. So that's a very, very small amount of something that's too wide. We can take a look at it if you'd like, or even if you wouldn't like, because you're not here. So I'm just going to do it. And it's actually this word right here. Believe it or not, this is sticking out into the margin a little less than 1/72nd of an inch. If there are more, that's a warning message, by the way. That isn't going to stop us. If there are messages that are going to stop us, they're going to appear here, and this is a toggle to go back and forth between the errors and the rendered output. Okay, so that's it for the main.tex. Pretty much, you don't really need to change much of anything else in this. You just need to go into the different sections, and I've put some stuff in the sections that give you examples of how to do things. So, for example, here's a way to put in a citation. If we take a look back here, you'll see that this command cite p, which stands for cite in parentheses, causes the output file to have a citation in parentheses that's appropriate for this particular piece of work. This particular work is this is a label for this work, and it appears in the references database right here. It's the very first thing in the references database. It's a book, and this label is called the key, and that's what you use in the body of the document to cause this to be printed out. And so that information is printed out in alphabetical order according to the style file that I've issued in somewhere in main.tex. I've said what style file is, and I think it's an APA or roughly APA style, and that style has caused it to abbreviate. See, I've put Abraham Silberschatz here, but here it's A Silberschatz. That's because of the style file. It's taking this database of information and formatting it according to the style file. Okay, so let me go back to intro.tex. So another way to cite papers is to cite them in text. Cite T cites them in text, and what happens here is I'm going to get the word Dumont in the text, and well, here, let's just take a look at what we get. So a paper by Dumont et al., 2007. So everything after by has been put in by the cite T command. Okay, and then next is a figure, and this figure is a PNG file. That happens to be this PNG file right here. Wow, that was big. So I've set that PNG file to display at a width of 3 inches here, and I've centered it, so that's why it's centered across the page here. If I take out the begin and end center, it'll be left justified. And it has a caption, and it has a label. And I can refer to that label in the text so that I don't have to say figure 1 and then it turns out that this isn't really figure 1 because I added another figure later. So over here I've said such as figure ref. So ref is followed by whatever this label is. In this case it's Fig iSchool logo. I just made up this label, and so all I have to do is match it in the reference. Same thing is true of a table. Table has a caption. This table is centered. It's this table right here. I've used the LaTeX tabular command, or tabular environment, I should say, to make this one up. And the way that the tabular environment works is you have a description on the first line of the table. This gobbledygook right here is the description. This stuff is just the at open curly brace, close curly brace that's at the beginning, and the end of the description is just to make it look better. I can never even remember what that stands for. And then all the letters in here are justification for columns. So this says the first column is right justified, the second column is center justified, the third column is right justified, and the fourth column is a paragraph, and the paragraph width is 2 inches. So in the body of the table, you see I've got this paragraph that's 2 inches wide, so it word wraps within that 2 inches. And I've got a top rule. You can't really see on this screen unless I zoom in on it. Can I zoom in here? I can't remember if it's possible to zoom in or how I would zoom in. I don't know. I don't know how to zoom in. Here we go. Here's a zoom in. If I zoom in a lot, you can see that this line is thicker than this line. So top rule and bottom rule are thicker than mid rule. But you only will see that if you print it out on a good quality printer. Probably you won't notice it in the on-screen copy. So that's just something to make the thing look nicer. And then here is a bulleted list. And the way you create a bulleted list is begin itemize and end itemize. That's an environment. And within that, you can put item in here. You can actually change if you want. If I put I'm going to put square in here in square brackets. And what's going to happen is this first one is going to have a square, an open square, for its bullet instead of a dot. So you can do that if you feel like it. I don't feel like it usually. I just leave the defaults most of the time. That square is handy if you're doing math because you can use that to end a proof. But that's about the only thing the square is good for. Okay, so that's the end of intro.tex. And then what's the next thing after intro? I've forgotten. Let's see, related work. So where's related? Here's related work. So here's, I put in related work, I put some examples of equations. So you can use displayed equations, you can put math inline. If you put math inline, I always do it like this. There's another way that's preferred, and which I always forget. I'm really old. I've been using this LaTeX for a long time, so I use the old way of using dollar signs around it. There's a newer way that's better. And so I can do, so here's, for example, an integral that's in line. It doesn't change notice the line spacing here is not changed. For displayed equations, and there's another way to do displayed equations than this. And you can look that up in a LaTeX manual. I can't remember how else to do it. This is just how I always do it. For displayed equations, it puts additional vertical space before and after the equation. And I should mention that I'm using a typeface here, so I've set it up to use the Stixx Typeface by default. And I set that up not because it's very good looking, because it's actually kind of ugly in my view. Like, for example, this summation sign and this integral sign don't go together very well. But the Stixx font has more math symbols than any other font. So you're much more likely to find the symbols that you need if you need anything odd in this font collection than any other font. So there are more attractive fonts. If you're not doing any math, I would use a different font personally. Or if you're doing very limited math, I would probably use a different font. And you're free to do that. I don't think that we're going to place any restrictions on that. Here's a citation of a website, and I just wanted to point that out because let's take a look at it in here. That's Brignall. That's the last one in here. And it has the type, the citation type of miscellaneous, and it will accept a URL. And if we look at how it's displayed, Brignall is displayed with the URL. Okay, so that's handy if you want to cite websites in your paper. Okay, so what's after related work? I guess method probably comes next. Methodology comes next. And wow, that's pretty brief. Summarize what you've done, but not the outcomes. And then the outcomes are going to be in experiments and results. And then what comes after that? I guess the conclusion. And it's typical to have some subsections in conclusion. And here's a citation. If I want to cite a string, this is something I probably should have put in related work because that's where you're going to do it. If you want to cite a string of papers at once, do it like this, a single cite p command with commas in between them, and I think they'll come out with semicolons between them in the APA style. Okay, so that's about it. You generally don't want to change this file. You don't want to change this file. Here's an instructions file that there's no preview of. You can download it. It will tell you what I've just told you. If you prefer to learn things by seeing them, typed out, then that's useful. Oh, I guess there are the appendix files, so those are just placeholder files. And although they're sections, they're shown differently in the table of contents. Notice that because I put the appendix command in the main.tex file, their section numbering is in letters instead of numbers, Roman instead of Arabic. Okay, so that's pretty much all I have to say about all of this stuff. I encourage you to contact me if you have any questions. Thanks for listening.